Hello, I'm Avery Flainer, and this is my final project on sociological self-portrait. Um, Here's a picture of me on signing day, where I'm going to Freed-Hardeman, and then just a picture of me with my soccer team, which I'll reference both of these things later in my presentation. Okay, so what my goal is for the sociological self-portrait. My goal is to look back throughout the weeks and look at all the projects leading up to the final assignment. I will briefly go over each week's assignment and how I went about the assignment and how it affected me. My main goal will be looking through these weeks to see how each week affected and shaped me as a person and taught me something new. Okay, so we're starting with week 1, which was using our sociological imagination. Our first week's assignment, we were told to write about our collegiate decision and the driving factors behind that. We were also directed to talk some more about our majors and what our thinking was for picking the majors that we chose. So in my response for week 1, I talked a lot about soccer, which is a big part of my life, and then it'll be a reoccurring thing in some of my writings as it is my passion and one of my favorite activities to do. I started my response referencing the impact my parents and family members had on me choosing to go to college, as well as me wanting to continue my soccer career. I also highlighted why I was taking Campbellsville courses, as it is the college my high school selected to take to offer courses from. So basically, my parents had a really big impact on my decision to go to college, as basically my whole family has been to college. And also I wanted to continue playing soccer, so those are two driving reasons. And then how this week impacted me. This week really made me reflect on some of the key contributors to one of the biggest decisions in our lives, whether or not to go to college and which one to go to. I think this week taught me many things can have an impact on my decisions that I don't even think about. Like, I just think about it subconsciously. So on to week 2, the culture interview. For this week's assignment, we were told to arrange an interview with someone from a different culture than ourselves. The goal was to really get into their shoes and learn about a culture that we may have different hobbies and beliefs from. So for the culture interview, I decided to interview one of our family friends, Grace Absher. Grace is of Filipino descent, and I was excited to interview her as I did not know much about the Philippines and their people. We talked about lots of different subjects regarding her culture, things like different hobbies, customs, food, and music. I learned a lot throughout this assignment and a lot on a culture that I was very unfamiliar with. How this week impacted me. This week helped me to embrace another culture and be able to really appreciate people with different beliefs and customs than myself. Week 3 was the agents of socialization. This week's assignment focus was all on the agents of socialization and how they affect us. We were told to speak on how these agents of socialization affected us and our beliefs and values. We were also asked various other things, like how they affected our social networking and how they affected the activities we pursue. And then I made a Google Slides presentation for this week's assignment. For the slides presentation, I talked about how the people I see most on a daily basis, such as friends, family, teammates, and classmates, affect me as a person. For example, I talked about how how my family shaped me into the person and instilled lots of good values in me. And I talked about how my friends affected me through humor and making me laugh. How this week impacted me. This week helped me reflect on some of the things that shaped me to the person that I am today. And I just think it's important that I get different feedback from different groups. I'll get different feedback from my parents than I will from my friends. And I think it's good to have multiple different people you're going to. Week 4, status to structure. This week, we dove into what different statuses are, like achieved and ascribed, and which ones we occupy, and if we had a master status or not. We also talked about the roles that these statuses were attached to, and if you had experienced role conflict and role strain. After talking about these statuses, we talked about the groups that we were attached to with them, primary and secondary groups. One of the statuses that I occupy in a big part of my life is being an athlete. I have several symbols that display me as an athlete, from my social medias to the clothes I wear and the hobbies I pursue. One of the biggest roles attached to being an athlete is discipline and hard work, which are two things I pride myself on. for this assignment, we talked about the groups that we are in due to our status, and my main group was my soccer team. And then this is just a video of me playing soccer. I thought it'd be cool to throw it in there. These are my 99th and 100th goals of my soccer career. So fast forward real quick. Here's my 99th goal, which was a penalty. And then, oh, my fault. And then my 100th goal should be right here. Yeah, right here. I just put these in to kind of highlight one of the biggest parts of my life and show y'all what I like to do, and also just kind of make it interesting. So week 5 is deviance and social control. This week's focus was all about deviance and self-control. For the assignment, we were directed to think of the acts of deviance we or someone we knew had committed. And we were told to choose a theory of deviance and describe an example to relate that theory of deviance. Lastly, we were directed to talk about how power can affect sanctions for deviance. For this assignment, I had lots of thoughts of acts of deviance that I had seen committed firsthand. For my response, I started talking about how different areas around the U.S. and around the world would view deviance differently. For my example, I talked about how sometimes on my 10-minute break at work, I would take 15 to 20 minutes, as others would do it there too. I described my relationship with McDonald's, the McDonald's I worked with, as social conflict theory because it worked due to us needing resources from one another. What I mean by this is the reason I was working there, obviously, is that I needed money, and the reason that they hired me was they needed employees to run their business, so it was beneficial for both of us. Week 6 was social mobility. This week's focus was all about social mobility, but more specifically the social mobility in the US. We looked at different videos with graphics and statistics that showed us how difficult it can be to move up. We learned that the bottom 20th quintile can be very hard to get out of, and the US is not a very socially mobile country. We learned a lot about the impact your race, education, and other factors can play on social mobility. In my response, I really highlighted the factors that went into social mobility. I think some factors should be factors and others should not play a role in social mobility. What I mean by this is, like, one example is that it's not okay how different races can have a harder time moving up the social ladder than white people. A factor that I believe should be a factor, or at least considered, in education and what level of education they have achieved. And what I mean by this is race shouldn't play a role in social mobility, but things like education, I can see that playing a role in social mobility. Week 7 is your race and ethnic identity. This week's focus was all about our race and ethnic identities. We reflected over different racial moments we have experienced in our lives. We were also told to think of different events with people with a different race than us. And the main point was going in depth on how our race/ethnicity has shaped us into the person that we are today. For my response, I talked about race and how it has affected my life. Being white in America, it has not affected me directly in too many ways. In my response, I did not talk about how in America and other countries we still have people being treated differently solely on their race. In my response, I also referenced the time I had seen people treated differently because of their race. And so, in conclusion, this course has really helped me learn a lot of the main things of being social mobility, agents of socialization, and learning about a different culture. Those are my three favorite weeks and the ones I've learned the most from. And I enjoyed learning lots of new topics and expanding my knowledge on all these different sociological subjects. And yeah, thank you.